and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Hammond, here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We're going to dispense with the chit-chat today because we've got a lot to talk about, and by that I mean just one thing, because it, by all rights, should be the only story at this point in the national discussion, but we're going to spend some time doing what the national media is not that interested in doing, which is examining the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump within 60-ish days, within 2 months, and being appalled by it. Because many of my colleagues have not been able to take a moment to do that. We're going to talk about what they've been doing instead, but I feel like we should give it some moments, right? So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to do that, as always, with my co-host, Vic Mattis.
Hello, Mary
of the Washington Free Beacon.
Great to be here for this. I do want to say very quickly, I think the week got off to a good start for us since we got a nice shout out from our friend Hugh Hewitt in his Washington Post column as a great podcast to listen to.
That is a glimmer of good news, as is, by the way, and we're not going to get deep into it, but I do want to note it, the exploding of the pagers owned by Hezbollah operatives all over Lebanon, which is about as targeted as an attack as one can possibly make.
I'm obsessed by some of the videos. The fella in the grocery store, that got him good. And I thought, not since Dr. Beeper from Caddyshack has someone had a bad beeper experience like that. If you have to go back, it's when he's at the swimming pool and he gets electrocuted like that.
When 90s drug dealer cosplay goes wrong, you know? So we'll talk more about that in depth in the next episode and a lot of things. But I do just want to focus on the fact that over the weekend, Donald Trump was playing golf at his own club, and yet another person tried to take shots at him. Now, this person got no shots off. The suspect was found in a tree line, I believe behind a fence, posted up with, some access and some sight, not directly to the president, but to where the president would eventually be, the former president would eventually be.
And really would have depended on where the ball would have landed in a weird way.
Well, he might have been studying his golf game. Trump was on the 5th hole. This guy was on the 6th hole. These Secret Service agents who were doing a sweep ahead of the president, which is part of their protocol, saw a muzzle of a gun and immediately engaged with this guy. He ran away, leaving behind the plates of armor he had set up in black bags to protect himself. Apparently a GoPro of some kind. We can only, I think we can surmise that he was planning to live stream this event. He had a long gun that was powerful.
An
with
AK-47.
I believe that's correct. He ran off. A witness, thank goodness, saw what car he was driving. Because he, a 58-year-old, by the way, who has lived most of his life in North Carolina, but most recently has lived in Hawaii, Ryan Routh is his name, was driving sanely with traffic, right? So he could have blended in had someone not caught sight of this car. They caught him. He is in custody. He has been arraigned, will be charged at least with illegally having a firearm and a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The governor of Florida is talking about some other charges for him as well, perhaps attempted murder. Can we just...
Yes, Mary Catherine.
Remember when the last person tried to kill Donald Trump? That was July 13th.
Yeah.
After that, you'll remember the head of the Secret Service was not compelled to step aside or take any real responsibility for that. She was eventually forced to. Yeah. And the acting director...
She was shamed into it by partisan.
Yes. The acting director, Ronald Rowe, is now in charge. But if you'll remember in July, when they were first questioned about this in front of Congress, bipartisan anger at what had happened, AOC said, and we said on the show at the time, she was right. They said, we can get you a report in 60 days. And she said 60 days is too long. It's unacceptable. It's unsafe. We have people who are under threat. And they were like, apparently they just decided 60 days would be fine because they have yet to get the report publicly. I think they have delivered something in parts to Congress. But nonetheless, it was too slow to get a read on what was wrong last time in depth in order to change anything to catch future problems. Like, there was another assassination attempt before they even got their report in. Yeah. This seems like a real problem.
For me, there's a lot of questions. It's like, okay, first of all, I was watching the I hate to say Commanders, the Redskins-Giants game, right? The Commanders, right? And it went down to the wire, and in typical Redskins fashion, they won by kicking 7 field goals because they can't actually score the touchdown yet.
I can't laugh. If anybody saw the Dogs game this weekend, you know why I can't laugh.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So then, and then I had turned away, and then you texted because it was close to around 4 o'clock, a little after 4 o'clock then, and you said, okay, and yet another assassination attempt on the press. I said, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it cannot be. And and then all of a sudden I switched over to the news, and it was. And I thought, okay, as usual, what do we know and what do we don't know, right? So what we know, okay, here's what I know from what I've read, which is, number one, he doesn't seem well. The assassin attempt, the shooter, the would-be shooter, does not seem well. If you look at the way he was when he was apprehended, if you look at those body cam shots and everything else, and even now when he was in court for his arraignment, he's smiling. He's just kind of, he's a disturbed fella. And,
with apologies to Ed Begley Jr., has an Ed Begley Jr. look.
Yeah.
A skinny older man with blonde hair, although it's been dyed different colors at different times. And wearing a pink shirt, which I have to say, if you're at the club, is acceptable.
It's Florida. Yeah. He was armed, as we mentioned, with an AK-47. I don't know if it was in a semi-mode or if it was, an actual, AK-47 machine gun, the kind of you see like on the A-team, sawed off.
That's what I was going to say.
It's always I don't know why in the A-team there was never a stock to it. It was always sawed off.
We had the exact same cultural reference in mind.
Yeah.
When you said that, I was like, I know what he's going to say.
Yeah. I'm picturing, I'm picturing, Hannibal, coming out of the van with the machine, with the AK-47. In any event, he had access to that, and he had where I should say the license plate was the license serial number. Sorry, was scratched off, which itself is a very serious crime to be in possession of a gun like that. And we know that he had apparently been waiting for 12 hours at this particular golf course.
Yes, he was there from 1:59 a.m. to 1:31 p.m. Sunday.
And according to the New York Post, that he had posted on social media things such as democracy is on the ballot and that we cannot lose. Okay, so that's what we know, and that he was heavily involved in a plan to bring Afghan soldiers to Ukraine and wanted to go there himself, and then he was rebuffed. But can we talk about the things that we don't know? For example, Mary Catherine, Donald Trump plays golf at a lot of different places around the country, certainly in Florida itself. How did this person know that Trump was going to be at this particular course in West Palm Beach and not the Doral, and waiting there for 12 hours? And my understanding is that Trump had decided sort of at the last minute, okay, add it to the schedule. I want to go play. It's a Sunday.
Right.
And maybe the shooter knew Trump loves to play golf on Sundays, and one of these Sundays he's going to show up, to this particular course. And has he been waiting every Sunday from 1 a.m. to 1 in the? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know.
Well,
how did he know?
The local sheriff did note. I mean, this is not a guy who's from here.
Yeah.
His residences have been Hawaii and Greensboro, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. He has a rap sheet, by the way, that's pretty extensive. Not huge crimes,
run-ins,
but some gun crimes in there, and having firearms when he shouldn't. He was at one point reported to the FBI for having a firearm when he shouldn't. That was not followed up on, according to reporting on that. For their parts, by the way, Biden and Harris, glad he's safe. Violence has no place in America. That was Harris posted on X. Biden said that the Secret Service needs more help. America has suffered too many times the tragedy of an assassin's bullet. It solves nothing. It just tears the country apart. We must do everything we can to prevent it and never give it any oxygen. So that's where they were immediately.
And Trump said that Biden called him and said that Biden could not have been nicer.
Yes.
On the phone. And they were so relieved that the threat to democracy is safe. It's just, sorry. We'll get to that.
Yes. So on one hand, there's a possibility that, the Trump plays golf a lot, and everyone knows he plays golf a lot, right? Yeah. So maybe this guy who's from out of town flew in and was like, I'm going to spend the weekend on the golf course, and I'm going to wait it out.
That's quite
or maybe
lucky.
he had more information.
Right.
I'd like to know which one of these it was.
And if so, from where? From whom?
Again, clearly the detail is doing its job. This guy clocked him, engaged with him. Luckily, even though he fled, he was apprehended. But in the press conference immediately after this, it was revealed, and honestly, you and I should have guessed this because our cynicism about the federal government should have no bounds.
Yes.
I foolishly assumed, after he was almost assassinated the first time, that the rule whereby he was treated not as a sitting president they would just like find some wiggle room there and change the coverage. Now, apparently they did add some coverage. That is what Roe says.
Yeah.
But it did not rise to sitting president coverage. And I would just say that once you've been almost assassinated once and you are a former president who is running for president in a very pitched election in very weird times, that maybe we could have been nimble enough to just shift. Shift then in July.
So the acting Secret Service Director, Roe, I believe is his name. He was fairly defensive, I thought, at the press conference. He was very vocal. I mean, he was very loud, and he wanted to assure everybody that, contrary to what you might think, former President Trump has plenty of protection if you look around. Nevertheless, it is still not the same, obviously, as Biden, but it should be more, as you were saying, than like, I don't know, George W. Bush or
and
Bill Clinton.
The problem for him is that they have things to answer for
Yeah.
that they have not yet answered for. They have things to adjust that they have not yet adjusted. The fact that there are brave and capable people who work hard and do the job inside this agency does not change the fact that the agency is not being nimble enough or smart enough or whatever or just accountable enough. Because yes, you're right. He was bellowing about their great success. And it's like, hey, let's maybe just deal with the facts and tone down the back patting for a moment. Because there are you didn't even turn your book report in. Yeah. Okay, Ronald.
And let's keep in mind we still don't know the motive of the first shooter or what his internet or whatever history is. We don't know.
Well, and the allegations at that time that he had some connection to burner accounts in foreign
the burner accounts,
countries. This shooter we know has foreign contacts because he's a deeply involved, committed weirdo activist. And I'm saying weirdo activist not because the cause is weird, but because he's weird. Yeah. In the fight for Ukrainian freedom, to the point that he's recruiting mercenaries to go there. But here's an interesting twist. This person, Ryan Ralph, is quoted approvingly during the sort of buildup of the Ukrainian war, approvingly in all sorts of mainstream media. Yeah, really Semaphore, weird. New York Times, Newsweek, just to give you a...
He appears.
He appears in them. He is treated as sort of a sophisticated and enthusiastic player in this game. That's interesting.
He had a GoFundMe page, is that right? To try to,
I think so.
For his operation of sending the Afghan soldiers to Ukraine.
By the way, we're going to talk about media coverage extensively, but let me say the Free Press, as usual, offering just about the only introspective piece from media, where it's a reporter who interviewed Ralph for Semaphore
That's
during
right.
the lead up to the war. And she talks about, well, why did I take this guy seriously?
Yeah.
She said, I didn't know any of this about him, you know, when
Right.
his rap sheet, when I interviewed him for Semaphore, where I worked at the time, nor apparently did any of the other outlets who took Ryan Routh seriously. Right around the time my story ran, the New York Times interviewed Routh. He met with elected officials on Capitol Hill. He had contacts inside Ukraine's defense ministry. Journalists, activists, and policymakers saw him as a credible figure. Over the past day, I've been thinking a lot about who else gets the same kind of pass. These days, the right kind of crazy is there every time you turn on the TV or scroll through your social media. No ears were harmed. Carry on with your Sunday afternoon, Rachel Vindman tweeted casually, referring to Trump's previous assassination attempt a mere 2 months earlier. She later deleted it. We'll talk about that too. The story of Ryan Routh is a cautionary tale. Our increasing willingness to tolerate madness in the service of the causes with which we might agree risks obscuring the simple fact that the right kind of crazy is still exactly that, crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you to this reporter for thinking that through and examining herself a bit and realizing that because he was basically on the right side,
it serves her purpose.
I said, okay, this guy seems legit.
Right.
Also, this plays into media coverage because can you imagine, and we're going to do a lot of can you imagine if it were flipped, but can you imagine if it were flipped and a possible assassin of Kamala Harris had been quoted approvingly as an invested and energetic activist in one of our causes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in one of, on a publication
in
of
the
the
Daily
right.
Caller, in the Free Beacon, in the Wall Street Journal, they'd lump them in.
Had a field day.
It would be the absolute end of the world.
Yeah.
And I do think, because he's quoted in these places, people know him. People in major media circles know him, and they're not going to do introspection about it except for this person who I appreciate very much.
Well, you don't want to expose your own flaws.
Her name is Tanya Lukianova.
Okay.
So
yeah, but you wouldn't want to expose your own flaws, and which is why you're willing to just move on and pretend it didn't happen. But again, just at this point in time, there's just so many questions that we have, and like Oliver Stone is out there, he'd be having a field day with this. You know, it's like fair play for Cuba.
I mean,
Operation Mongoose. It's like, you know, what is the connection? So,
by the way, did you see Senator Blumenthal react to the reports that they have been given a couple of days ago by Secret Service?
Of the second attempt or the first attempt?
This is before this happened.
Yes.
This is before this happened.
People are talking about it.
The audio is very quiet, so I'm going to read it to you guys. Blumenthal asked outside of a briefing about their report on the first assassination attempt. I want to be very clear because it gets tricky now that we have two. Democrat Senator Blumenthal just stated, I think the American people are going to be shocked, astonished, and appalled by what we will report to them about the failures by the Secret Service in this assassination attempt on the former president. He went on to say that Homeland Security in particular, he felt had stonewalled them and been very dishonest and not at all forthcoming. And he was mad about it. Again, because they didn't get their book report in on time, we don't know what's in it yet. And I wonder if, because it's still behind closed doors and now they're dealing with a second assassination attempt and the fallout from that, what will we hear about it? Will we see this report?
Nothing. I think the best thing that needs to happen with Secret Service is that it needs to be transferred back to the Department of the Treasury, because DHS is just this behemoth of a bureaucracy, and clearly things are falling through the cracks.
The thing that worries me, by the way, about the Secret Service, and it's been plagued by all sorts of problems since the Brazil story? Is it Brazil?
Bogota. Was it Bogota?
Or
Colombia.
Bogota.
Yeah, wild.
Colombia story.
Wild.
And the shenanigans that happened there. You know, it's been plagued by scandals. What worries me is that of the federal agencies, the Secret Service is one that has a very focused mission.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And normally
you have one job, as they say.
No, with federal agencies, normally I go like, yeah, you guys got a lot of mission creep. You have too many missions. You have too many things going on. Of course, you're not going to be good at the ones that you're supposed to be doing. Secret Service doesn't really suffer from that problem.
Yeah.
It has the one job. And whoever's in leadership is not up to it in the way that the people on the ground have been up to it. Yeah. There's also a report from Hawley's office. Have you seen this from a whistleblower? This is, again, the first assassination attempt. We'll follow up in 60 to 90 days about the report on the second one. Senator Josh Hawley, this is National Review reporting, released a whistleblower report Monday on the law enforcement failures leading up to the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump 2 months ago. He was released one day after a suspect was apprehended in Florida for trying to kill Trump at his golf course. So the whistleblower says, overseeing the Secret Service's security operations at the rally was an unnamed lead agent who apparently has a history of incompetence and who directed the placement of certain items around the stage of the Trump rally that impaired visibility. The individual is allegedly known to be a low-quality agent and failed an examination on the way to becoming a Secret Service agent. We will find out more about this at some point, I'm sure.
Only the best.
Balls have been dropped, guys.
But this is where, we're very fortunate because when these things happen, we have a media that will come the vigilant media that will make sure that all these questions get asked and answered.
So good. Can I read from John Podhoretz, who writes? Yes. You should read the whole thing. I was going to say
where to begin, but
I know it is hard. It is hard to begin, but I think he encapsulates it. Mm-hmm. He writes the assassination wish fulfillment at commentary, and this is the part that got me. He says, Donald Trump has refused to go away. He lost the 2020 election and wouldn't admit it, wouldn't stand down, wouldn't stand for a peaceful transition if there could be a chaotic and dangerous one. And the minute the next president began to serve, he began to run again, something no one in his position as ex-president had done from within his own party for 130 years. People hate him. They revile him. They fear him. They despise him. What they would like more than anything is for him to go away. A great many people in most of the nation's elites, secretly or not so secretly, wish they could see the result sought by would-be killers, Routh, and crooks. And while they know they must pay lip service to the fact that assassinations are bad and wrong and shocking and all of that, they simply cannot muster up the emotion of horror. That's what's missing here from the coverage and discussions of these two attempts. Horror, because they are not horrified. And in my experience, that is true. Yeah. It is an indictment.
They're going through the motions.
It's not true of every single person.
Yeah. No.
But largely it is true.
I asked this before, but if God forbid something terrible happened the third time, would it shock you if you saw on social media somebody say it had to happen?
No, not at all.
If they wrote a piece, there was a column by whoever.
It wouldn't shock me if it was
it was unfortunate, but it had to happen.
It wouldn't shock me if it was an anchor.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would not shock me.
Well, because now, of course, as you know, the spin is that it's his rhetoric that's getting him, that's putting him in harm's way. He needs to stop talking because that's what's, saying the inflammatory things that will get himself killed. It's not the other side that's saying things about him. It's him talking.
Yes.
Somehow.
Indeed. It is him. In fact, there's a lot of people who are trying to figure out who the victim is.
Right.
In this shooting. Mm-hmm. Like, we neither know the guy's motives. And by the way, we should note that his political donations were 19 small donations to Democrats.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Like, yes, he had some scattershot views, clearly very dedicated to the Ukraine issue.
Right.
By no stretch of the imagination can you call this guy some sort of right-winger, although they will attempt to do so because that is what happens every time.
Like Lee Harvey Oswald. Because it was in Dallas. It was in Texas, and that's where all, and that's where all the right-wingers are, despite the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald had defected from the Soviet Union.
No, literally a communist who went to live in the Soviet Union, and they turned him into a right-winger,
right?
Because it happened in Dallas,
right? And so I mean, and they have the people in the media have the power to do this, and so likewise, I did see briefly Jimmy Kimmel on his show talked about the would-be shooter and say we don't know his motives.
Oh, we could never know.
It's all over the place. It's all over the place. He said it's all over the place.
There's a little bit about that in this AP story that they list a bunch of things that are like a little bit unclear, and then you get like 10 paragraphs down. It's like, he also gave 20 donations to Democrats, and
that's the part you want to.
At one point, let me find the sentence. It's very funny. He's like, In June 2020, he offered a post on X directed at then-President Trump to say he would win re-election if he issued an executive order for the Justice Department to prosecute police misconduct. That year, he also posted in support of the Democratic presidential campaign of then U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, who has since left the party and endorsed Trump. Aha, we've got him now. He future predicted that Tulsi would be a Trump supporter.
It's all part of the master plan.
Wait for this sentence. However, in recent years, his posts suggested he soured on Trump. Oh, really? I don't think we needed the posts to tell that, guys. And he expressed support for President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. In July, following the assassination attempt on Trump in Pennsylvania, Routh urged Biden and Harris to visit those wounded in the shooting. Anyway, he's got like a long social media history. But like, I believe someone also found a picture of his truck with a
Biden
Harris sticker on it. It's like,
I wasn't sure if that was authenticated,
guys,
but I saw the same thing.
I feel like we can come to some conclusion.
We don't know.
Anyway, we can never know.
Yeah. Can I give you we're talking about the media here, my favorite headline from Politico, which was, quote, Republicans outraged by possible assassination attempt.
Yes.
Which is at least they're talking about it.
Republicans pounce.
Right. They did. But you mentioned, of course, and Guy Benson mentioned, I think, USA Today.
Yeah, USA Today's like above the fold headline was like
nothing. It was about America's hope being hopeful.
Yes, I actually did a little perusal this morning, just days from this assassination attempt, of the covers of our major national publications, and it is precious little.
Yeah,
precious little being said about
an
assassination attempt of a former president who is currently running for president.
I encourage our listeners to go to freebeacon.com. Thalia Rampersad and Andrew Stiles put together a pastiche of media reactions to it, including in print publications, as well as Lester Holt or whoever else, and the references to golf course incident. It's really it's quite something.
One of the stories, while we're talking about media coverage, which we will do a lot here, was the Washington Post, and this is the one I sent you, and I was like, I'm going to lose my mind. The Washington Post is trying to figure out who the victim is. Who is the victim of this shooting, this apparent shooting attempt on Donald Trump? By the way, there was like half a day. One of the reasons you didn't hear about it while you were watching football is because for about half a day, there was a lot of effort put into saying that this had nothing to do with Trump.
Wow.
Because there was an allegation of another shooting that might have been near the golf course. And look, I want to be careful. We don't have to jump to conclusions. Right. But there was a lot of work going on to try to make it totally unrelated.
Downplay it. Yeah. And it can't happen. It can't happen again.
It turned out it was very much related. This is the Washington Post. They've decided that the real victim is the Secret Service. Trump's golf outings have long concerned Secret Service. Sunday's episode in West Palm Beach made gravely apparent the security challenges at the former president's private golf courses. So, everything would be okay if he just stopped being a public figure, stopped running for office, stopped talking.
Yeah. Just go away.
Stopped playing golf. All those things. Or if he would just get hit by the bullet,
Right.
I guess that would make them.
And by the way, if I were playing golf, the would-be shooter would have actually been dinged by my golf ball, because that's where it would land, in the bushes.
See, he's a good golfer.
Yeah, I know. That's why. So he's he knows he's going to be on the fairway, which is actually accurate. I know we have to be very careful, obviously. We don't know. I mean, to peg him on. This thing is a developing story, so the whole issue of causation. But I do think that words matter, and what people say. And again, we've been talking about this for a very long time, that if you tell people constantly that this person running for office is a threat to democracy, and you make these comparisons to Hitler, which happened recently, by the way, on MSNBC with Claire McCaskill, and I'll get to that in a second, then, the question is, how far are you willing to go to stop the next Hitler? Or every time they say this is going to be the last election, if he wins, And so Claire McCaskill's on. This is obviously before the second assassination.
Before the second assassination.
Before the second attempt.
Not before the first one.
Right. And she had mentioned people throw, bandy about comparisons with Trump to Hitler and Mussolini. And then she says, but what makes Trump worse? Okay, and then that's it, ... So another, wait a minute. I said, what do you mean? Makes Trump worse than Hitler and Mussolini? Really? So that's not great.
By the way, I highlighted this, and I just want to note it real quick from the Washington Post story. Roe, who's the guy in charge of keeping Trump safe after all of this, in keeping with his tendency to crow about the agency and not who they're supposed to be protecting. Roe also emphasized that Trump's outing had been unplanned, forcing authorities to work on the fly. The president wasn't even really supposed to go there, Roe said. It was not on his official schedule. Thanks, my dude.
If it's not on the official schedule, again,
mm-hmm.
how is that guy there?
Mm-hmm.
You know how? I'll tell you how. Trump told him. It's all part of a master plan.
It's all
master
a setup.
plan.
No, but you're right to talk about the rhetoric, because we always got to talk about the rhetoric. And I want to be clear, which involves being not at all charitable, because I don't think they deserve it. The press believes that right-leaning rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric are bad and dangerous. Left-leaning rhetoric is good. And even if it is actual violence, is also sort of good, because it leads to you're doing it for the right reasons. Right? Whether a Republican or a Democrat is targeted or hurt, it is the fault of Republican rhetoric.
Right.
It is never the fault of left-leaning rhetoric. Now, I am a person who I keep my rhetoric responsible. I try to be a good person, good actor in the public space.
Yes.
I don't want to say that rhetoric immediately incites these kinds of incidents, because I don't want to chill other people's speech. However, if you're going to chill people's speech, you need to do it even-handedly, right? If you're going to tell me to bring the temperature down, then you need to be engaged in bringing the temperature down. Because if you think that is our civic duty, which I actually do think that that's our civic duty, not because I'm blaming the other side for violence, but because comporting yourself is a good thing to do nicely, right?
Right.
It's responsible. But these a-holes, and I'm going to read my impression of them. Look, we're all just reasonable journalists here who would like to bring down the temperature. But obviously, if you have a chance to shoot baby Hitler, you shoot baby Hitler, and it's laudable to do so. And I don't know why this baby Hitler man won't lower the temperature, as I am clearly doing right now. That is every journalism panel on this subject.
This is,
They're like, to be sure, the temperature should come down. Also, we will continue to talk about how he's a grave threat and a fascist.
Yeah.
And this is the last election, and we're going to spread the bloodbath line again and again. Someone did it on MSNBC this morning.
Without the context that he was talking about an economic bloodbath. And that's been dispelled even by Snopes.
Hillary Clinton's going to go on TV and say he's a danger to the country one day after an assassination. Again, I don't even think that her rhetoric necessarily creates violence. But just for the sake of good manners.
Right.
You don't go on TV a day after someone was attempted assassinated.
She also talked about the need to consider possible legal and criminal action against disinformation online.
They hate free speech.
Yeah, they really
hate it. And the thing is,
I think I kind of see where this is going.
Yeah, a lot of journalists hate it, is the thing.
Yeah.
And
there's good speech and bad speech.
This should all be seen as the cynical bullshit that it is. Yeah. When they make the rhetoric arguments, when they say bring the temperature down, it is an attempt to shut up one side of the aisle and to chill the speech of one side and to give themselves rhetorical open season, because all the things that they say are good and fine. And encouraging rioting in the streets and the burning of America's cities in 2020 was like racial justice, guys. It's fine. That political violence is fine.
Or when a Democratic congresswoman was telling people to get in the faces of Republicans or members of the last Trump administration. Do you remember that?
Yeah, or
in public, at restaurants or department stores.
Not let them go to restaurants. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
It's constant, again, because they believe that when they're doing it, it is righteous and good.
Right.
And when the other side does something, it's bad and disqualifying.
The problem is this is a judgment call. It's the same thing with the disinformation, and so we need to, threaten legally people, who are spreading disinformation and lies on social media. Okay, fine, but who's making that decision? And what would you consider it? Because some people I wouldn't trust.
No, not at all.
Make that decision.
So let's see. Shall we play Lester Holt trying to find the real story here? Because as we can judge from the front pages of all of the websites of our major news publications, the main story is not someone trying to assassinate Donald Trump. That's not the main story.
Apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims about Haitian immigrants in Ohio. This weekend, there were new bomb threats in that town. Our Maggie Vespa is in Columbus, Ohio, with more.
So you go. The amid and against a backdrop of is an attempt to connect these two things when they have absolutely no evidence that they're connected, which, by the way, is the thing he is lecturing Vance and Trump about in the moment. He's saying that they're evidence-free or relatively evidence-free pet eating stories are irresponsible. He is then connecting them to an assassination without evidence.
It's also worth noting, by the way, that Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has clarified that the threats to the schools and other places in Springfield, as a result of the allegations of the pet eating of Haitian migrants, was actually coming from overseas.
Yes, there was 33, and DeWine himself said in a press conference, these came from overseas. They did not come from deranged Trump supporters, which is the allegation without evidence of media. Yeah. Dana Bash used this against J.D. Vance in an interview this weekend. Other outlets have used this connection to say that the rhetoric of these guys caused these bomb threats. Right. Except they're hoaxes and they're from overseas. I'd really like to know what country those are from. And Mike DeWine should be as forthcoming as possible about that. But also the journalists should be like, yeah, we made a connection that wasn't there.
You're imagining the media's saying, they're going to say we got something wrong? Is that what you're imagining? They're going to say that on the air?
Well, again,
Catherine, where have you been?
Again, the lack of introspection, right? Everything's fine for them. It's fine for them to make the leap that these stories that they didn't vet correctly and that are being used irresponsibly and that were used in a bad way to become this national news story, it's bad for them to do that. But it's not bad for media to say that their bad stories caused bomb threats without evidence. Do you see? Do you see where the problem is?
I feel
one side has to fact check, the other side is not.
I feel like Lester Holt and Dana Bash and others are in some ways trying to repent for having been so tough on Democrats in the past, including Kamala Harris. So like Lester Holt's famous interview with Kamala Harris, where she says she hasn't been to the border, but she's never been to Europe either. What's your point? And, the Trump campaign keeps on just replaying that over. It must drive Lester Holt insane that he was instrumental in this. And,
the thing
unwittingly, because of course he didn't imagine she was going to have such an awful answer.
Yeah, because he didn't ask her a hard question.
Yeah, and now he's just very much
or an unanticipated question. He asked her a normal question. David Frum, by the way, thinks that the victim of this attempt on Donald Trump's life is all the other people who have died in other shootings. So he has a piece up called Trump's Guns.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, I mean, Rachel Vindman, who we mentioned.
That, and yes, and you mentioned you mentioned her tweet about.
So Rachel Vindman is a character on our national scene because she is she has a career of her own, but she is the wife of Alex Vindman, who was the whistleblower in the Ukraine phone call.
And issue. So then who is Eugene Vindman, who's running?
I'll get to that.
Please help me.
So Rachel's married to Alex Vindman, who we know from the Ukraine story. Alex Vindman's brother Eugene Vindman, Evgeny Vindman, is running in Virginia 7, the very close, hard-fought district just vacated by Spamberger.
Right, because she's going to run for governor, we think? Or no?
Is that
maybe. Okay.
I can't remember.
She might take on Winsome Sears, but who knows? Okay.
So Rachel Vindman, who is always commenting on national politics and is very sort of a gadfly on Twitter, tweeted, "No ears were harmed. Carry on with your Sunday afternoon." Which is just an incredibly flippant way to deal with
because it's
something
not
like this.
it's not just that the president almost died on live television in a most awful way, but it's because somebody else died and other people were injured.
Yes.
It's not a joke.
It's so gross.
Right.
And then she doubled and tripled down. She said,
did.
"Sorry, you're triggered. I mean, no, I'm not. I don't care a little bit." She then went on eventually to delete that tweet.
What, you mean that sorry, I'm not sorry you're triggered, that tweet or the original
both
tweet?
of the original tweets.
Oh.
I assume somebody over at the tough, competitive Virginia 7 race run by her brother-in-law was like, "Hey, dude," not helping because her husband went to bat for her as well.
Oh.
So they were just making a whole mess of it. But my favorite thing about her deleting the tweet is it's like, whether it's aimed at the former president, the media, immigrants, or political enemies, and every incident should be addressed appropriately if we want to change the tenor of our political discourse. Oh, good job. Good idea, Rachel.
She says that herself?
But then she goes on to find the real victim. And you'll never guess. It's Rachel. It's Rachel. Rachel has sat awake many nights wondering who might be outside. I have known the instant fear of receiving an unknown package or letter. I have had my child ask me if we were safe and if someone was going to hurt our family. So just to recap, she's the victim.
Yeah. Great.
That's an important one.
Thank goodness for Wayback Machines and screenshots so that people can find this and remind those voters in Virginia 7.
Also from The Atlantic. Let me not leave out Tom Nichols. The Atlantic sent this in an email to me. Trump is no Gerald Ford.
Right.
So I guess part of what we're saying here is that Gerald Ford didn't deserve to be shot.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump is different.
Because that was within a short span of time. There were 2 assassinations.
Yes, Gerald Ford was just like 3 weeks apart or something. Very small. Yeah. And it was a wild time. Squeaky Fromm, one of the members of the Manson family, was one of the women who tried to shoot Gerald Ford. Both women, by the way. Yeah. What has happened to gender equality that no women suspects? Yeah. We've fallen so far. This is the nut graph on this one. Are you ready for this?
No, I'm not.
Donald Trump is using another possible attempt on his life to inflame tensions in America, which is one more reason he should never be president again. There you go.
That's an amazing turn.
It is.
It's just, how do you...
It's impressive. It's
the guy's almost shot twice, and it's his fault, and he's the problem.
And that's the reason you shouldn't.
That's the reason why you should not vote for him.
No one should vote for him.
Yeah, great. Okay.
If this was flipped, by the way, not only would the media demand be that, no, even a tax-related critique of Kamala Harris would be deemed off limits. Like, hey, have you seen the climate?
Right.
Like, you can't talk about her capital gains, unrealized capital gains tax.
That's personal.
The woman was almost murdered.
Right.
Right? It would have to be so sensitive. And by the way, it should be more sensitive.
Right.
Right? If you do, I don't know, if you do a convention in the several weeks after your opponent has been almost killed, maybe at that convention you should mention that and how you're happy he's not dead, and you should do a tribute to sort of a bipartisan feeling that our politicians should be able to run for office without the threat of death upon them. And then maybe like soft pedal a little bit the personal attacks. Did that happen at the DNC? Remind me.
No.
Vic?
It did not. And the end result, of course, is he had it coming. That's the end result. And they have plenty of cover, to get away with these sorts of things. It is amazing how they're able to turn this into Trump's fault. It's along with trying to tell voters that Trump is the preferred candidate, preferred presidential president for all these adversaries of the United States.
Right.
And something tells me that that's not the case, particularly Iran, which I think we now know officially has had
that's the other thing.
designs.
There's some open knowledge of an Iranian threat against his life as well.
Yeah. And the Secret Service detail remains sort of just enough.
By the way, isn't it interesting that when it comes to that, or when it comes to the bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, nobody's interested in foreign influence anymore?
Yeah.
They just
That
decided,
used to be a thing.
It used to be something.
Yeah, it was a big thing in 2016, 2017.
Reporters were really into that for a while. Yeah. I'm going to play you a clip of, this is a really interesting one. Who's the victim this time? Are you ready? This is Juliet Kayyem. I don't know how you say her last name. Who's a national security analyst on CNN.
I really, I don't care what you feel about him or Harris. I mean, this is the expectation that he will be safe, and the reason why this is, in some ways, you said how close the election is. The problem is this is a safety issue that is being thrown into a very intense political environment in which the very fact of an assassination, a constitutional moment, because it could have impacted voters, will be used for political purposes, and that to me is just exceptionally unfortunate, because whatever your beliefs are, we do deserve to have campaigns that are not where violence isn't being used as either a sword or a shield.
Mm-hmm. So what you're hearing here is a national security analyst lamenting that Donald Trump might be viewed more sympathetically.
It's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. She is asking that he never reference his own assassination
while he's
attempts.
Running. Yeah.
Right. She would like him to shut up about that forever.
Yeah.
Because that would actually constitute interference with voters' choices. Now, the interference she's not worried about is the one where he dies.
Yeah.
And voters have their choices disrupted that way. That doesn't seem to concern her so much.
That would be more of an situation.
Yeah, like we've moved past that, and now we're concerned that, like, Trump's rhetoric about the fact that he's been targeted by an actual man with an actual gun again is the problem.
And throw into that, by the way, Mary Catherine, the banning, in effect, of the famous photo from Butler, Pennsylvania, of Trump being very defiant and raising his hand and his fist in the air, and the blood on the side and the Secret Service around him. You can't have that photo because, of course, that is also...
Yeah, it gives people feelings that they don't want people to have, right?
Yeah. Because it helps the one side.
Here's another Washington Post headline. Trump stokes suspicions about assassination attempt, raising fears of more violence. Subhead, after an initial period of relative restraint, the former president has begun blaming the shooting on his opponents and amplifying conspiracy theories. To which I said the other day, do you remember, Vic, the flood of retaliatory violence that was supposed to happen after July 13th?
Oh,
right. That was the big.
Right. That was the big fear. That was the big concern. Is that
the big fear is not
not only was it a fear against Democratic officials and certainly Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, but the media was scared themselves of being targeted.
Yep. Big, huge flood of retaliatory violence. Yeah. Well, what actually happened? We're 2 months in. I believe there were some incidents, including this one. This is a notable incident that went the other direction.
Right.
There basically was no retaliatory violence. There was a nice RNC that had a really positive vibe, and people were very thankful that he hadn't died. Hulk Hogan ripped his shirt, and then some of them said, like, "Oh, isn't that a little problematic to have all this masculinity, this toxic masculinity on stage?" Again, it's always Trump's fault. It's always the right's fault, even when they're being shot. Now we're here again. There were 60 days in which you saw proof that there wasn't retaliatory violence, and yet the problem is still...
It continues to be.
...hypothetical right-wing violence in response to the actual violence that they do not care about.
It reminds me of all these awful acts of anti-Semitism that are being committed post-October 7 especially.
Yes.
And the latest one about the student at the University of Michigan being assaulted and spit on.
Yes, we will get to that later in the week because we got to get into the details.
When it started happening and there was concerns for the safety, particularly on campus for, not just for Jews in the city, but Jewish students going around and how they have to sort of hide their faith. How the administrators always went out of the way to mention anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, as if that was a thing that was happening. That would never, that would never happen on a campus. Oh my gosh, it's anyway.
I tend to think the real problem is the assassinations.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
That's very Norm Macdonald of you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the big problem.
Yeah,
and the utterly ridiculous double standard is just getting on my last nerve, as you might have noticed.
But is it getting on your nerves because of just the audacity of it, or is that because you might get the sense that maybe nobody except us care about it? Like the public at large is not moved by this.
It's the audacity. It's also disappointment. And I think this happened after the Gabby Giffords shooting, which was horrible.
Sure, that was.
And an act by a person with schizophrenia who had a fixation on her that was not at all political.
No.
But
and grammar. He had a fixation on grammar.
But I was covering that day for the Daily Caller. It was a weekend, and I was on the front page. So I followed that story really closely as it was breaking and was putting the news up. And I saw the turn that the media made, and I had never seen that before.
Yeah.
And I found it so horrifying.
You mean the Sarah Palin crosshairs?
When they decided, we need to pin this on someone,
right?
And we're going to pin it on someone we don't like, and that person's going to be Sarah Palin. And it's because Sarah Palin put out a map that had targets on it, signifying targeted victory for congressional
for various
races.
Congressional districts.
It had nothing to do with him. He had nothing to do with Sarah Palin. And by the way, a staff member died at that event too. Gabby Giffords has admirably recovered, and it's so nice to see her in Congress doing well. But someone died at that event too.
Right.
And they just took the thing and turned it into whatever political tool they needed it to. And I, silly me, looked around and was like, I don't think y'all are interested in the truth. Is that what's going on here?
Well, and not only that, and the truth sort of trickles out, so they can sort of bury any possible corrections,
And then I was there for the congressional baseball shooting.
Right.
And when I say there, I mean there.
Literally.
It happened a block and a half from my house. The man camped out in my neighborhood for a month. He planned to hit Republicans specifically for their conservative or Republican beliefs. He confirmed with a person going to the baseball field, who I believe was Ron DeSantis, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. Are these people the Republican congressional baseball team? Before opening fire on them. He was a Bernie bro. He was very clearly... He could not have made it more clear what his motivation was. And that was inconvenient for the media, so they didn't really care.
Yeah, I was going to say, so after what you just explained, what you're saying is we don't really know what his motive is.
People don't know his name. Hodgkinson, by the way. People don't know the date of that shooting. If you asked press
no.
In D.C., the neighborhood, which is very, very liberal, which, by the way, J.D. Vance currently lives in, is notoriously a place where you see in this house we blah, 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 blah.
Right.
No hate lives here.
Right.
There's no commemorations of that day.
No.
Or any noting that a leftist maniac tried to take out half the congressional caucus of Republicans one day. And I was on CNN at the time. And within 24 hours, we had moved on from that story.
Yeah.
I know because I was on the air. And the first segment I did within the 24 hours was about, wait for it, Trump's rhetoric.
Even then.
Even then, my friends. Yeah. One last clip for you guys. The double standard, very obviously illustrated here on CNN. This is a Washington Post reporter talking to, I believe, Dana Bash, and giving a little lecture to J.D. Vance for not getting his facts straight.
Yes.
Again, I basically agree on the pet story.
Sure.
Get your facts straight. As I've said many times, deal with the real people speaking at these meetings. And that's not to say that they aren't getting real complaints from people, but there's evidence of people getting hurt who you can talk about that are less incendiary, that have more facts behind them. Deal in that. Yeah. So I agree with that part. But here's what she starts with.
J.D. Vance said something a bit different but similar yesterday in Atlanta. Let's listen.
I'm not going to say we're always perfect. I'm not going to say that conservatives always get things exactly right. But you know the big difference between conservatives and liberals is that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months, and 2 people now have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last couple of months. I'd say that's pretty strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out.
Leanne?
So, well, first, we don't know that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months. This is the Secret Service's job to keep people safe. There are threats on a daily basis of the president, the vice president, elected officials, members of Congress. But J.D. Vance is also the person who started the false rumors more than a week ago about Springfield, Ohio, about false claims about the Haitian immigrants there. And that has led to bomb threats, school evacuations, city hall evacuations, and a feeling of terror in that community as far as reporting is concerned.
Okay. So I just want to say that the Washington Post reporter here on a CNN panel begins her lecture about evidence-free rumor mongering with some evidence-free rumor mongering about secret plots against Kamala Harris. And then she ends it with a causal connection between the pet rhetoric and the bomb threats, which has now been disproven by actual
to the governor.
Facts. Yeah. It's just a conspiracy unfact-checked sandwich to her lecture about how everyone needs to fact-check their conspiracy theories. And did the anchor say anything to her about that?
Oh, no, they're just nodding along, much like David Muir on ABC. Oh, okay. We don't have any troops abroad. Great.
Good work, everyone.
In war zones. We don't have any troops in war zones. Great. Okay.
In conclusion, I think it's very important that people keep trying to assassinate the former president who's running for president, and I wish that the press would also think that was important. And appalling. Okay.
Very Catherine. You know, this is actually, according to my records, quite possibly episode 300.
Oh, really?
Yes. Time flies when we're in a state about things. That's the second thing is I think our listeners do have something to look forward to on the next episode. Is that right, Jennifer? Is it going to be a special episode?
We will do a taste test.
Is that a Fall Spice episode? She's nodding. It might not be. It might not be. Okay,
we don't know when it's going to be.
Okay, well,
we can't possibly know our motives.
Cut that part out. Okay.
We can't possibly know the motives of ourselves.
Okay, why do you keep it in? Now you know how you get to see how the sausage is made. You have no idea the stuff we take out. Okay, I do have a clarification and a call out. So quick clarification. Thank you, Kayla Elizabeth, for revealing that quote. This is from X quote. When you order delivery directly through a restaurant like Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or whatever, they don't actually have their own delivery people. They just contract with DoorDash and another delivery service. Even pizza is often now just DoorDash people, she says. So I said, wait a minute, that can't be true because I get the option on my Chick-fil-A app for the food delivery. And you go to one place, it's DoorDash, and the other one's Chick-fil-A. Okay. And I clicked on the one for Chick-fil-A, and there in tiny print it says DoorDash. But they get in the DoorDash car, and magically it's better. The quality, it's still warm. They know where they're going.
The Chick-fil-A blessing goes with the DoorDash.
Yeah, it goes with them. Yeah. Yes, it gets the imprimatur. Okay, and then finally a call out to new listener, Sam Yoda, who said, you and Vic's analysis is the first one I'm waiting for. I'm a recent podcast subscriber, and it might be my favorite overall. What?
We love that.
It is, and I would say that is accurate about your analysis. Mine ain't worth a spit. on the Vicometer, as I call it. It's like, the question is, did I make you laugh?
I think we're doing,
chuckle.
Well, maybe not today.
That's my metric personally. Today is questionable.
Today
was. This was a tough. It's a very special episode.
I know. Well, my analysis on this subject is a bit emotional because I find it appalling to find out that people don't really care.
Well, people are terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
As also, let me clearly say at the end of this how truly blessed we are that both of these attempts have failed.
Yeah.
Because the thing that the press will not take time to be appalled by is exactly what that would mean.
Yeah.
And how terrible it would be for our country. And they can't see past the fact that they don't like this person.
Right.
To figure that out. And so I pray continued blessings on everyone in the public eye, because it ain't going to be good if something goes wrong. So thank you to all those who keep everybody safe, and let's continue to do that. Maybe get y'all's book report in about what went wrong.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the podcast at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube and Instagram. Thank you again, Hugh Hewitt, for the shout out. We appreciate it.
Can't wait for those ad dollars to come in. Woo!
This has been a Nebulous Media podcast, and thank you for getting hammered responsibly.